Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Hacking the Hacker. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. You have joined the presentation using your computer speaker system by default for audio. If you would prefer to join over the telephone, just select phone in the audio pane in your attendee control panel, which should be to the right of your screen, and the dial-in information will be displayed. You can see an example of that on your screen now. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions into the questions pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of the presentation if time permits. What is not addressed during the Q&A session will be answered directly via email after the webinar. Today's webinar is being recorded, and you will receive a follow-up email with a link to view the recording. I would now like to introduce John Prenderville, also known as JP, and Zachary Koopman. Take it away, JP.
Hi, I'm John Prenderville, also known as JP. I'm the Client Service Desk Manager at TNS.
Hey guys, I'm Zach. I'm the Platforms Manager at TNS. And if anyone has spoken to both of us, they know JP is the handsome one and I am the smart one.
That is accurate. So today we're going to talk about security, and you guys will notice that we're going to be spending a lot of time focused on a few recurring themes. These are the key areas of focus when it comes to securing digital assets and the integrity of your data in a modern connected world. Some major mistakes that are often made when it comes to security are a lack of password policy or a password policy not being strictly enforced, lack of employee education, unprotected mobile devices, not performing software updates in a timely manner, and lack of investment in security measures. We're going to discuss what all these things mean, how they're interconnected, and how to address them.
So let's lay it out there. Most small to mid-sized businesses think that they don't need to worry about security because you feel like you're a small fish in a big ocean. Most security analysts will agree that over 50% of small to mid-sized businesses are at risk for a data breach or a cyber attack. There have been recent examples of high-profile breaches at major companies like Sony, Experian, and Facebook. These are companies with huge security budgets, and they are still vulnerable. So if you're a small business with, and you haven't really thought about your security budget at all, you might be at risk. Furthermore, there have been a rise of automated attacks that are done really through computer programs and robots, and it makes it that much easier for them to target small businesses because they're actually not spending time attacking you. A computer is doing it for them, and it can hit thousands at once.
So I want to delineate some of the differences and areas of overlap between exploits, ransomware, and phishing. Exploits include ransomware among other types of malware, rootkits, botnets, etc., Trojans. Ransomware is a specific type of attack that encrypts valuable data and then drops a payload requesting payment to decrypt it. It's often delivered via email attachment or via link within an email. Now, phishing emails frequently have ransomware, but they also can try to get user credentials or use more targeted attacks using social engineering to attempt to get you to process a financial transaction, for example, like a wire.
Every year, there's really different kinds of threats coming out. If we go back 20 years, we can see really just completely different vectors that people are going after. Just very briefly, the love letter worm is really one of the most interesting early viruses that came about. It would send emails through your web program to all of your contacts in your address book, and that was delivered through a VBS script. A year later, people riffed off the love letter worm. They attacked with a different method using macros in Office documents, but it was kind of the same idea. It would send emails to people in your address book. Fast forward a couple of years, we've got spyware that is now starting to track what you do on your computer. Then we also have Trojans that are kind of sneaking into your devices and gathering data from them.
So going a couple of years forward to 2014, we started to see examples of remote access Trojans, which drop a payload that enables certain types of remote access that allow an attacker to manipulate machine settings and steal data behind the scenes. JSocket was one of the more popular variants of a remote access Trojan. It basically collected system information and established a backdoor so an attacker can upload malicious executables like keyloggers, which can track every single key that you hit on a device. Exploit as a service in 2015, what this essentially did was provided tools that were previously only for the initiated hackers and put them up for sale to the highest bidder. So now basically all of these exploit tools would be available to anybody who was willing to pay for them as a service. 2016 is when we saw Locky ransomware. It is one of the nastiest variants that had existed to that time. It got very, very notable and spread very, very quickly. It garnered a lot of headlines.
Mobile devices are really, I think most people personally don't think about them as an attack vector because they're so ubiquitous. Everyone uses a mobile device every day, and you don't really think of it as a vulnerability. You feel like they are secure devices, and you don't necessarily think about how much work you do with your mobile device with the company. I have my company email on my phone. I chat with my my colleagues using Microsoft Teams. And so when you think about it that way, they become a vector for you to be attacked. And sorry.
So BYOD is extremely popular for SMBs, given the expense of outfitting every employee with a dedicated company phone. And not only that, most employees don't want to carry around two phones. This does create a challenge in terms of device management, however, since it is an employee's personal device. In most cases, there is not a policy or software applied to enforce device software updates, restrict users from downloading potentially malicious applications, or other particular security policies that we can apply.
So let's unpack some more of the security concerns with BYOD and talk about some strategies we can implement to address them. So one of the big ones is just essentially the idea of malicious applications. You think that just because the application's on the Android Play Store or the Apple App Store, it must be pretty safe, right? Both Android and Apple screen apps that are put up on those stores, so there must be little risk, but realistically, there are thousands of third-party applications out there, and there are documented cases of malicious applications out there on those stores for download. They can do a variety of things. They can harvest your user data, including passwords, files stored on your devices, and they can also drop malware onto the mobile device that it's installed on. And so, as an example, we'll talk about an app like Facebook. Facebook is, most people probably have the Facebook app on their phone, but there are other Facebook apps, quote unquote Facebook apps, on the app stores. They might use official images or logos from Facebook, loading screens, and they're just really an alternative method to access the website. If you go onto the App Store to find a Facebook app, you could inadvertently download that app. It could harvest your Facebook login credentials and do lots of terrible things with it. Also, if you're browsing websites on your phone, there are a lot of ads out there that can redirect you to applications on the App Store, and the website will know whether you're looking at the website from an Android or an iPhone device, so it'll guide you directly to it. And if you do install those malicious applications, they can sometimes delay their effects for weeks before they actually kick in. So you might not even know that, you might not correlate the performance or the issue on your phone with the app that you downloaded because it's been a month since you downloaded that app. The good news, though, is that there are researchers out there that are trying to combat these applications, but there have been some recent issues. Generally, when they're testing and trying to expose what these apps are doing, they are basically making a virtual phone that's running on a computer, and it can do most things that a phone can do. But some viruses have been basically designed so that they won't run unless certain things are accounted for. So, as an example, your phone has a gyroscope. Your phone knows when it's moving, and they have made their application only run if it can detect that your phone is moving. So obviously those virtual phones can't move, and now researchers are having a hard time trying to kind of watch these apps work and figure out what they're doing. The other thing that you might run into issues with is that, the apps might be legitimate, but they're asking for excessive permissions. So if you've ever downloaded an app from the App Store, it's probably going to ask to access your contacts, maybe your microphone, or your device storage, but it's not really limiting that to certain conditions. If you give it microphone access, it could access your microphone at any point in time and start recording you.
So third-party mail applications, like the Facebook app Zach just mentioned, will very likely do what the end user intends, which is send and receive mail and allow you to manage your inbox. The question you need to ask is what's happening to your data when it's in transit, when it's in between your mailbox and the intended destination mailbox. It's very possible that your data is being stored or harvested on third-party servers. Additionally, many of these apps don't support remote wipe capabilities that default email apps or supported Microsoft Mail apps, for example, do, which adds a big additional challenge for IT administrators if a device, for example, is lost or stolen. So when it comes to security updates, when you buy a phone, no one is going to force you to update it. Your phone comes with a certain set of pre-installed security updates and a software version, and you can go for months, years, the entire life of a cell phone without theoretically ever applying any security updates. So TLS clients out there, most if not all of you are aware of the fact that we use our RMM tools to push Windows updates to your fleet of company workstations and laptops to keep them up to date and protected. In today's hyper-connected world, it's extremely likely your employees are also using mobile devices to interact with company data just as often as they're using a PC in some cases. So the potential for an attack to originate from a user mobile device not managed by company policy is higher today than it ever has been before.
And probably the lowest hanging fruit when talking about passwords for phones, no one forces you really to put a password on your phone anymore. And if you do, I would probably bet some money that it's 1111 or 1234, some sort of keyboard walking that's easy to remember, easy to type in because you're typing in hundreds of times a day. If that phone is stolen and you don't have a password on the phone, or if it's simple, anything on that phone can be accessed. It could be corporate data, documents, emails, all that. So to recap, mobile device management is a system that allows us to cut down on attack vectors by centrally managing devices. If you have a BYOD policy and you don't have mobile device management in place, you are outsourcing your security to your employees, and you're really just hoping that they're taking the necessary steps to secure the device, but you're not enforcing it. We have solutions available under our TLS Protect product suite that allows us to enforce update policies on devices, force users to create passwords, force them to create non-simple passwords. So 1234 goes away. You can set minimum password length requirements, and you can also restrict what kind of apps are available to be downloaded and installed on these devices. It supports smartphones, iPads, Android tablets, any device that's running a supported mobile operating system.
So I want to give mention to the term Internet of Things, or IoT. This is a term that I'm sure any of you who have read tech news in the last few years have almost certainly heard of. The term refers to all of the internet-connected smart devices now found in homes and offices across the globe. We're talking about thermostats, IP cameras, doorbells, coffee makers, refrigerators, trash cans. I mean, anything, once analog, now digital, they're all collecting and analyzing data. And some of that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, the fact that my refrigerator can now tell me when I need to go get a gallon of milk is pretty cool, adds some convenience to our lives. But you have to also consider that it represents yet another potential attack surface. Now, in contrast to IoT, we're also today going to talk about the human element of security. This represents a weakness that really goes back to the beginning of time. Users, the human beings who interface with technology in its varied forms, almost always represent the weakest link in a security chain.
So, I mean, realistically, it can be really hard to detect scams as just a regular person. You receive probably hundreds of emails a day, and you have a lot of things to do. So generally what's happening is someone is accidentally and unknowingly doing something wrong. It could be opening a bad email and downloading a file that they shouldn't. They could be a good Samaritan. They could have found a flash drive in the parking lot, and they just want to figure out who it belonged to. So they plug it in, look to see what kind of documents are on there, see if they can identify the owner. And guess what? That flash drive had malware on it, and now it's causing problems. One of the best things you can do is make sure that people are aware of what's going on, and you can do that with security awareness and testing. So you can, measure who is at risk and provide people education over time, so that you're not just doing it once and it's continuing to be in people's brains. So I would bet that most people on this call are probably guilty of maybe having some weak passwords around or reusing passwords. I would ask if people are using the word, using password 1 as a password. That is not even close to being a secure password. If you throw in a capital letter at the beginning and an exclamation point at the end, you're doing a little bit better, but realistically, you're not doing so great. You could use a password that is something like, say, my password for email is password 2000 exclamation mark. That's actually pretty good. That's 24 characters or more. It's pretty easy to remember because it is a phrase, and it's easy enough to remember that you're not going to need to write it on a Post-it note under your keyboard. So people walking by your desk aren't going to know how to log into your computer.
The first place someone will look for a password is under your keyboard on a Post-it note. Don't do it.
I prefer to put it on the monitor myself.
Oh, thanks. That's much better. So let's talk a little bit about brute force cracking. A brute force attack is one of the primary means by which a weak password is exploited. It's essentially a trial and error method launched using automation software, and it can be very easily foiled by, 1, having a more complex password that makes it harder to brute force, and 2, this one's for the administrators out there, enabling a lockout policy. So after a reasonable number of failed attempts, the account will be locked and will not be able to be logged back into until an administrator manually unlocks that account. Additionally, using a next-gen firewall will allow you to log and then block repeated attempts from malicious actors' IP addresses out on the internet. Also a very good security measure to protect against brute forcing. So there are a number of different approaches to a secure password. One would be a dictionary word mixed with symbols and numbers. You do not want to just use dictionary words because dictionary attacks are a very popular form of brute forcing. If you are just using well-known common dictionary words as a password, it is much easier to be cracked. As Zach just mentioned, using a phrase or sentence that's easy to remember but complex and lengthy, that's a very, very good strategy. It's also generally too difficult that a brute force attack is not going to be able to crack a phrase as long as it's long enough and using enough characters. Now, the other thing you can do is any password over 16 characters is generally considered to be a, quote, strong password, especially if it's all random characters with symbols and numbers. This is great if you have a password manager or some way to be able to manage complex passwords like this, but if you're going to write it on a Post-it, you might as well not do it at all because at that point, it's just out there and easily able for anybody to grab, take a picture of, etc. And lockout policies, again, are incredibly important for protecting against any type of brute force attack, dictionary attacks included.
So one of the most common attacks that we see on a daily basis is phishing. You've probably heard of phishing before. Phishing is really a social engineering attack. What people are trying to do, they're trying to maybe pose as someone you know or someone that you do business with, and basically trying to elicit important information from you, whether it be passwords or get you to process a financial transaction. They might get you to download files from a link. People get hit with phishing attacks every day. We get tickets about it nonstop, and it can be hard to detect. We mentioned earlier that there are phishing as a service platforms, so you can pay for people to attack people for you. This is an example, is a Russian website. They boast that they sell phishing as a service. They offer subscriptions. They sell their services to all kinds of people. They have chat support. To date, they claim that they have 61,000 subscribers and that they've stolen almost 750,000 credentials. I mean, that's wild.
The chat support part is wild.
Yeah, I mean, it's an industry.
All right, enough education. Let's play a game for a few minutes. It's going to be fun, we promise.
So what we're going to do is we're going to show you slides with side-by-side examples of a legitimate email and a fake email. We want you to try and decipher which is which. You can use the poll function in your webinar menu to vote on whether it's a right or left. Pick the one that is fake. Let's get started.
Let's do it. So, pick the fake. What do you guys think?
We'll give you a little bit of time. We don't get to vote. Oh, no.
No.
Shoot. I think I know this one.
We have the answers.
All right.
All right.
Well, let's see.
The reveal?
So the one on the left was a fake.
So they look almost identical, but the domain on the left message is using amazeprime.com instead of amazon.com. You would all be amazed how many people will fall for this type of attack. We see it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, anyone can really go out and buy a domain, so it's not uncommon for people to register domains that are like one letter off of existing legitimate businesses.
Very good point. All right, next example. Left or right? What do you guys think? Give you a minute. Couple more seconds. All right, big reveal.
So the one on the right is the fake. And I honestly can't judge anyone who got that wrong because LinkedIn.com versus LinkedIncommunication.com, I mean, how are you supposed to know?
So there is a way that you can know, because it's actually not uncommon for companies like LinkedIn to use other domains for automated mailers, but you could confirm it using a Google search. You know, it's just a baseline, hey, is this domain actually LinkedIn? The other thing is, for the more technical members out there, you can do who is lookup. You can actually look up on a site like, for example, Domain Tools. You can see who is the actual owner of that domain. The lesson here is, when in doubt, don't click. Do more homework first.
Absolutely. And if you ever get an email that you're concerned about where it came from, if it could be phishing, you can always reach out to the support desk and get some help.
Absolutely. All right, next example. Let's see how we're doing. All right. Everybody get a chance to vote. Let's do. I hope you guys are getting the hang of this. Again, dropboxnotifications.com should raise an eyebrow and cause you to question the legitimacy of that message. Couple more. All right. Let's see what we got. All right, so this one really isn't that close, and given that you guys have been trained from the last few examples, it should be easy to spot. But what I want you to think about is untrained users who haven't done the last few slides with us, flying through their inbox, going a mile a minute. All it takes is one mistake. So a term that I recently heard used when it comes to describe an approach to user security, constant vigilance, and that is spot on. This attacker is going to send thousands of these messages, and it only takes one hit, one click, and they've got a hit. So users need to maintain a sense of constant vigilance and always slow down and make sure they know what they're clicking on. That is the best advice that we can really give.
Okay, this is the last one, and it's for all the marbles. All right. I think that was our best percentage so far, with 88% saying that it is the right that is the fake, and that is absolutely correct.
Well done.
And this particular example I love because this is a very common one. You get an email saying that your account's been locked out because of detected like malicious activity, when it is actually the malicious activity, and they're really just trying to get you to their website so they can get your password. So let's talk about some very specifics about the types of phishing attacks. So as I mentioned, all phishing attacks are social engineering. It falls under that umbrella. It is trying to get someone to perform an action that allows someone to access resources or process financial transactions. Spear phishing is a very general term that is just kind of it's targeting anyone. It's sending the LinkedIn notifications, the Dropbox notifications. It might not be super customized to the user who's getting the email, but it's just going after regular people. Whaling is, as you might expect, fish versus whales. Whales are larger, they're bigger targets. We're talking C-level executives, financial employees. As a side note, if your website has your executive staff's names, emails, and phone numbers, I would bet money that that data has already been collected by a malicious party and that they are gearing up to make an attack.
Very common way.
There are robots out there that are just going website by website, running algorithms that look for email addresses and phone numbers so that they can attack you under your CEO's name. And with that in mind, let's look at some examples.
So I hope all of you looked right to the email address based on our previous examples. The body of the message here, though, should also be a dead giveaway. So the attacker here is looking for a response to see if they have you on the hook. The content of the message should immediately raise an eyebrow. Also, even if the sender looks legitimate, if you get a message from somebody, the email looks okay, but the content seems off, always play it safe. Always pick up the phone, give the user a call, find out if they potentially didn't send that message. It's possible you could be being phished from an account that's actually been compromised. So always good, even if the headers look okay, the email, the mail to address looks okay. Be very careful when it comes to content and messages as well. If it seems off, ask questions.
So this is the same kind of idea. The name, Alex Rogers, is higher up at our company. We get an email asking with urgency, I'm in a meeting, which means don't reach out to me for questions. I'm busy, and I need you to set up a payment. And they'll try and use some things that might align. Quick payment is missed expenses. They want you to get it done in a hurry, make sure it's done before bank cutoff time. And if you don't want to ask questions, they're busy. You're just gonna do it, no questions asked. If you get an email like this, you really need to have a secondary form of authentication to make sure that requests for outgoing payments are legitimate.
So another example. Now, am I at my desk? Fortunately, we have a small enough office that I would stand up and yell to Alex, yes, I am at my desk. But let's say that you don't have that luxury. Does your company use Slack? Send them a Slack message. See if maybe they just sent you an email. What do you need me for at my desk? Pick up the phone. Again, if you have a larger office, stand up, walk, get that step count up. The key here is diversify your lines of communication when you have any doubts. If there's a potential that an email attack has happened and your email is compromised, do you think somebody's email might be compromised? Use a means other than email to confirm whether or not this is a legitimate message or not.
And this is going to be our last example. If you'll notice the mail to address, it's admin@privateemails.com. That's not anyone's email at our company, but the name is Alex Rogers. Anyone on the internet can send an email pretending to be whoever they want. If you look at like a real life example, I could take a letter and drop it in the mail, and the from address can be anything. I could pretend to be the IRS. That's a federal crime. I'm not doing that, IRS, but you could do that. I could pretend to be you. I could pretend to be your mother. You can do whatever you want. There are no rules on the internet. So if you get, and you get hundreds of emails a day, you process dozens of wire transfers a day, you look at the name, you see Alex Rogers, that's your boss, you just do it. If your company does not have an internal process for having secondary methods of verifying wire transactions, you are going to be a victim.
100%. So let's talk a little bit more about ransomware in depth. So as we discussed before, it systematically encrypts files on your computer, and then it's going to drop a bunch of files with instructions on how to pay a ransom and supposedly receive a decryption key so you can get your files back. Ransomware's evolved a lot over time. It's made itself harder to immediately detect. It's gotten better at traversing corporate networks and encrypting file shares more quickly. It targets backups now, depending on how those are stored. Essentially, anything that it can reach over the network that it wants to encrypt, it will.
So we can't stress it enough. The point of ransomware is not to destroy your computer. If they destroy your computer, then they're not going to make money. They need you to understand that your data has been compromised, that you will not be able to access it unless you pay them, and give you a means. If they destroy your only computer, you can't really pay them to get your computer back. So the data is the target. Many ransomware attacks are coming from foreign countries and are really targeting the U.S. And when they deliver their payloads, they can, they'll send out messages written in whatever language the victim is, so that they can get their money.
Yeah, even if I wanted to, I couldn't pay a ransom in Russian.
Yeah.
So as Zach just mentioned, the goal is not to take out your computer. You need your computer to pay the ransom. They just want to go after what is your data, not your operating system, not your program. So they're going to be trying to encrypt documents, pictures, videos, not operating system files. So most ransomware variants use path and file exclusions like you see listed in the slide here in order to accomplish this goal. And in the center of the box with files to exclude, those would be, in this example, the instructions for the ransom, which is why those specific files are excluded.
Yeah, if you ever open your computer and you see a bunch of files that you never created and they're named something like help your files,
give us a call.
Give us a call, please.
Yeah. So document vulnerabilities, Microsoft Office macros are the biggest example of this. Very popular vector for attackers going all the way back to the 90s. A simple Microsoft Word or Excel file with a malicious macro embedded can easily deliver a ransomware or other malicious payload. Screenshots above here will show you some warnings related to macros trying to run, and Microsoft Word, in this example, notifying the user. We get requests often, people may want to say, hey, I want to trust all macros. I work with a lot of Excel files that have a lot of macros enabled, and I don't want to have to click every time. This is the reason you shouldn't do that, because if you download a Microsoft Excel file from an email attachment, again, flying through the inbox, mile a minute, open it up, and all of a sudden there's no macro protection enabled, and it just runs, you're toast at that point. So the entire point of these warning messages within Microsoft Office specifically is to make you stop and think, hey, do I really trust this document? Do I really trust this macro? Those extra few seconds can really save you.
And really, if the document you're open, a lot of the times it's like a bogus invoice that you want to open because if you owe someone money, you need to pay it. If it's just like a little one-page document that's got text on it, there is literally like no legitimate use case to have a macro on it.
Yeah. So
if you get a file that has a macro in it, you should already be alert about it as a regular, non-power user.
Very good point.
So this is a timeline of one of the more prolific and ubiquitous strains of ransomware. It's called WannaCry. It's been making headlines for a long time. This specific variant of ransomware single-handedly made Microsoft kind of stop in their tracks and take some actions to protect some systems that they previously said they weren't going to do. So in terms of a timeline, the NSA created tools for their own personal uses. those tools were stolen. They were sold on the dark web and auctioned to the highest bidder. It became public knowledge that weapons had been stolen and would be used soon. And then Microsoft decided to release some updates for some systems that they said previously would never get any more updates.
We're talking about Windows XP and Server 2003. And
Yep.
for those of us in the business, when we saw that happen, it was amazing.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, people were using XP. You said you could use it for, what, 10 years?
Oh, and this was 5 years beyond that point.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for years they said, that's it. And they went back on their word because it was such a big deal.
All right, we spent this whole time talking about all these horrible attack vectors and ways for your data and systems to get compromised. Now we're going to cheer up and focus on what we can do about it, what we can do to play defense. Step one, first and last line of defense, backups. If you get hit with ransomware and you can restore a backup from 30 minutes ago, you are in pretty good shape. Yeah, you lost the time it takes to restore, but you lost a half hour of data. Not bad. Let's say you get hit with ransomware and you can restore from yesterday. Not great, but you didn't lose everything. You lost maybe half a day to a day of work. Now let's say you get hit with ransomware and you discover your backups haven't been running properly for a month. How about 6 months? How about a year? This just went from bad to worse to potentially out of business. So not only having backups, but also testing restores is critical to a solid backup strategy. Fortunately, for all of you TNS clients who are on the line with us now, our backup systems do have ransomware protection, and we do randomly do test system restores throughout our client base on a regular revolving basis.
One of my favorite phrases for backups is 2 is 1 and 1 is none.
Ooh, that's a good one.
And that's one of our internal mottos. And so the idea is just having a local backup, that's great, but that's really not enough. You also should have cloud backups as well, because something will come along and one of those two methods will be invalidated. And
diversity of media and file system is also important. If you just have an external hard drive plugged into the back of your server, guess what? WannaCry is going to get that. Lockheed's going to get that. That is not a valid backup strategy when it comes to protecting against ransomware.
Absolutely. And as we mentioned earlier, end users are really the weakest link in this chain. And the good news is that there is a ton of information out there for security awareness training. We offer it as part of our TNS Protect solution. And what it will do is it will work with your users to educate them. And it will actually, it's kind of mean. What it does is it will launch phishing campaigns against your users without them necessarily knowing. Mm-hmm. It will try and get them to, go to the links in these messages. And if they fail the test, they get a message, right up on the screen saying, hey, you should not have clicked on that. Here's why. Here's what to look for. This is really something that you can't make people sit in a half-hour meeting for just once. Like that's not going to cut it. You need to have repeated training over and over time. This is actually pulled from a report that we have. In September, almost 6% of emails that were sent out in this campaign were clicked on and the user failed. So 6% live people failed. And if that had been a real attack,
it only takes one.
It only takes one.
Yep. So let's talk a little bit about defense in depth. As Zach can tell you, I could wax poetic and talk about firewalls all day, but
I don't have time.
Yeah, I know. I'll keep it high level. So when we talk about gateway security, we're talking about next-gen firewalls. We're talking about perimeter security primarily. So that's going to give you intrusion prevention, advanced threat detection, URL filtering, secure remote access via VPN, lots of cool features and protections. When we talk about endpoint and server security, now we're getting down to your mobile device management platforms, your antivirus and advanced threat protection software that's installed on your endpoints. We're talking your workstations, your laptops, your servers. Generally, we're using the same or similar products, but with different policies when applied to user endpoints and server endpoints. Data security, when we say encryption there, we're talking about the good type that we control, so that if somebody walks out of your office with your server, they can't just boot it up and have all of your data, or pull your hard drives out and recover all your data. And when we talk about data loss prevention, we're talking about platforms which can detect activity that is suspicious on a network. For example, if an employee decided to download 100 gigs of data to a thumb drive, or even better example, sent themselves 50 important company files to their personal Gmail. That's something that a DLP platform would be able to pick up on. Visibility, we're talking about network monitoring, and specifically when it comes to malware analysis, we're talking about log monitoring. There are actually services out there that will automate this and do it for you, and note security events and actually report on those for you.
So let's review some, very simple things you can do. First and foremost, don't enable macros. It's tempting. You want to click the button. Don't do it.
Don't click the button.
Don't click the button. If you get an email from someone with an unsolicited attachment, you should be very careful with it. If you don't feel comfortable opening it, reach out to the help desk. Don't give your employees more login power than necessary. Not everyone needs to be an administrator of their computer. If they are an administrator, they can install something that they thought was legitimate that was not. Make sure your devices are patched. If you're a TLS client, we're patching your workstations and your servers for you. But if you don't have MDM, you're relying on your employees. Make sure you train and retrain periodically employees in your business on staying safe. Segment the company network. If you have lots of guests coming to your office, you can segment it so that you really reduce the risk of them spreading something to you to zero. And make sure you back up your files regularly and keep backups off-site as well.
So in closing, the TNS Group provides a wide range of security options to protect your company, your data, and your employees. It's important to take a first step when it comes to security. We encourage you to take a layered approach and implement solid company policies and best practices in order to achieve a secure environment. If you have questions about anything we discussed today or security in general, please reach out to us today. Our contact info will be coming up in just a moment. There it is. And if we have questions, we should be able to take a few of those. I think, yeah, we have time to take a few questions now, I think. So, number one, with so many security options, what steps should I take to protect my business when I have a limited budget? What do you say, Zach? Limited budget. I know what my answer is going to be.
I know what your answer is going to be.
Yeah, because I love firewalls, but there's more than that.
Why don't you go first?
All right, so I would say the two biggest, most important steps, even though, yes, we say employees are the weakest link, you may think I'm going to say right away security awareness training, which is a good thing, but firewalls protect you from the outside. When we talk about perimeter security, what a firewall does is it stops traffic from being able to come inside uninitiated. So that's protecting you even beyond the user level. That's an attacker can't just go right in the front door to my network. You don't have a next-gen firewall at this point. You're leaving your front door open. And the other thing I would go with is backups, because backups not only are essential against ransomware protection, but also a disaster. Your server room floods. There's a fire in your building. Having a solid backup strategy and a perimeter security strategy, I would say if I had a limited budget, those are the two first things that I would focus on.
I think that's fair. I would definitely stress on getting end user training though.
Oh, great. Yeah.
But absolutely. All right.
Okay, so this is a good question. If my company is hit by ransomware, what do I tell my employees to do? Contact us right away, first of all. And second of all, honestly, shut down your environment. The reason for that is because ransomware propagates. If you know what endpoint got infected, if a user comes to you and says, hey, my file system is being encrypted, unplug that computer from the network, shut it down. That way we've at least isolated patient zero. If you do not know where this infection is coming from, the best thing you can do is shut down the network until we can bring things up in a way that we can start to detect where this is coming from. So basically, spread prevention is priority number one if you think you've been hit by ransomware. Should I establish a policy on how employees access company email on their phones? Zach, you want to take that one?
Yeah, definitely. You definitely should establish a policy on how your employees can access company email. You should establish an SOP document that basically lays out what the company approves as an access method. So we're talking maybe the official Microsoft app if you're Office 365 customer, if you're using G Suite, enforce that users are supposed to use the Gmail app. And then you can take it steps further and bring in MDM and other platforms.
I would agree. And we actually do have policy template documents to help with crafting those policies, BYOD policies in particular, as it relates to this.
Absolutely.
What other questions we have, Zach? Anything else in the general chat? You know, we're getting a little late on time here, so why don't we do this? We'll do email responses to any of the remaining questions. We can follow up that way. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Really enjoyed having everyone, and hope you guys got something out of it.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much, JP and Zachary, and thank you to everyone for attending the webinar today. As mentioned, any questions not addressed today will be answered via email. You will be receiving a follow-up email with a link to view a recording of the webinar today. On behalf of JP and Zachary, thank you for joining us today and have a great rest of your day.